To
Hey folks, we're just gonna get more folks logged in here and then we'll get started. All right, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off here. Welcome to today's webinar, hosted by the New York Oracle User Group and Viscosity North America, an Oracle partner. We're excited to have you guys today. We have a first-time NYOUG speaker, Valli, presenting for us, so I hope you can give her a warm welcome and round of applause from wherever you're at today. We're super excited to have another live webinar for you guys this Tuesday. So feel free to submit questions in the Q&A field, and Valli will get back to you as she can or following the webinar. We will have the recording and slide deck for you, hopefully within 24 to 48 hours. So you can always go to nyoug.org or orapub.com, which is Viscosity's training site, to find those resources. Awesome. Okay, so if you're not familiar with NYOUG or Viscosity, no worries. We're going to tell you a little bit about ourselves. My name is Monica. I work for Viscosity as the marketing director, and I'm super excited to meet any of you at any Oracle user conferences, local, regional, or international user groups. I'm normally there, and I'm going to introduce you to Coleman in a second. He is the vice president of the New York Oracle User Group, and he's going to tell us a little more about NYOUG. So take it away.
Thank you, Monica, for that kind introduction. So the New York Oracle Users Group was formed in 1984 for the exchange of ideas, assistance, and support among users of Oracle software products. Next slide, please. You can connect with us on X, Meetup, LinkedIn, Facebook, and of course, nyoug.org. And we're always open for participants who have webinar ideas. Just submit it to us, and as long as we see Oracle mentioning it, you'll be guaranteed to get a speaking slot. And I just want to make note to everybody that December 17th, Habib will be talking about Oracle True Cache, which is coming up in another month. Thank you, Monica, for co-hosting this series of webinars with the New York Oracle Youth Group since 2020.
Yes, we are closing off another year here soon. So it's been great, and I've been very thankful for our partnership with New York Oracle User Group. We have been able to bring a bunch of great content, whether it's, AI, database, development, whatnot. So it's been a really good and successful partnership together. So thank you, Coleman and Rob. Okay, real quick about Viscosity. Again, my name is Monica Lee, Marketing Director here at Viscosity. We are a full Oracle Stack consulting firm with a core expertise in Oracle database that includes RAC, Oracle Apex. We do perform near zero downtime migrations and performance tuning, high availability, things like that for our customers. And we've got decades of experience in infrastructure, including engineered systems, which hopefully I'm going to have some awesome webinars in those three pillars you see here for us this coming year. So we are built upon these three pillars: data, apps, and cloud, or infrastructure. And across the bottom, you'll see things we offer for all three pillars. But if anything here speaks to any pain points you or your organization are experiencing, feel free to let me know. If you see an email from me or my team come through, you're more than welcome to reply back there. And yeah, we're happy to help however we can. We do have a lot of great resources under our belt. These are some of our books written by our consultants in executive management. Hopefully some of you own some of these, and hopefully some of you recognize some of our awesome and wonderful Oracle aces on our team. They're always out there presenting, whether it's digitally or in person, also always writing blogs, books, etc. So if anyone here looks familiar to you, you see them, say hi. All right, and on this slide, I just like to point out a couple things we do. We do offer managed services, and we also offer Oracle license management, whether that means purchasing something new, making sure you're audit compliant, things like that we do on the regular. So it's a lot easier to have a partner, whether it's Viscosity or not, help you out with that since we're doing it consistently. Okay, and finally, AuraPub is a Viscosity company now, and it is founded by a former Oracle employee, Craig Shallowhammer, and he still conducts training through AuraPub for us, and on site at conferences. But now we've got a bunch of our different consultants providing training and webinars through orapub.com. It's also where you can find our entire database of recorded webinars throughout time. So it's worth checking out. That we do have a free membership, and through the free membership, you can actually access tons of slide decks and recordings. There are a couple paid tiers where you get a couple different perks, and you can maybe see a few more things. But otherwise, the free membership is a great place to get a lot of extra educational resources for you and your team. Okay, and with that, I do want to remind you guys to check out our upcoming webinars, events.viscosityna.com or NYOUG.com for these webinars. And hopefully you can get registered for some other things that speak to you. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Coleman, and Coleman is going to introduce us to Valli, our speaker for the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. So Valli is an Oracle ACE Associate and Oracle Certified Cloud Architect Professional. As a senior database specialist with 20 plus years experience in managing large teams and designing and implementing complex database solutions for clients, there are several migration tips and tricks she learned over the years. She led several large DBA teams, local and offshore, to successfully implement innovative, cost-effective, and efficient solutions to help grow the client base. She works on Oracle, MongoDB SQL Server, MySQL, PostgreSQL, and Maria database. Recent emphasis has been cloud migrations and implementation on AWS OCI. Valli is a senior technical thought leader with hands-on database skills, enterprise-wide team leadership, Oracle architecture solutions, and project management experiences combined with multiple technology certifications. She's a lifelong learner known for bringing proactive thought leadership to the team. She's committed to raising the bar on team performance and equipping internal business units with the IT tools, automation needed to maximize productivity. Valli has over 25 years of Oracle database administration experience and has spoken at major Oracle conferences in the USA about the solutions she created. One more time, I'd like to thank Viscosity for co-hosting a series of webinars since 2020, and we look forward to another year to come. And thank you, Valli, for contributing today to this webinar.
Thank you, Coleman, for the kind words. You did give all as much details as possible. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are watching the webinar from. Thank you for taking the time to watch this webinar. Hopefully, it is helpful for you. I am going to take some time and just walk us through how to do a database migration cross-technology, especially, and what are some main things to watch out for, plan, coordinate so that it is smooth and seamless. And hopefully, once we get it to the target Oracle environment, we are actually able to provide better performance for the customers, which is one of the key things. Like apples to apple is great, but if we are actually able to finish a migration and then customer is able to give us the thumbs up saying they are performing better than they were, that really makes it a big difference for us. Monica, are you able to see my screen? I just did a screen share.
Yes, you're fine.
Yep, thank you. Sounds good. So let us go through just a little bit about myself. Like Coleman already mentioned, I'm an Oracle ACE associate, and I work predominantly with Oracle databases, have been doing a lot of migration activities over the past several years. Recently, been doing a lot, maybe in the last 5-10 years, I've been focusing a lot on designing and doing migrations to the cloud. I mainly work with AWS and OCI. I haven't dealt much with Azure as yet, just based on my customer base. It's been predominantly moving Oracle databases to OCI or to AWS. So when we talk about database migration, there is a lot that we need to look at and think about. It's not just taking your data and moving it. There is procedures, functions, there's several views that we create and we facilitate with the way the database transactions are enabled. So there is a lot when we need to think about a migration. All of the objects need to be migrated. We need to make sure all of the functionality actually gets translated and it works the way it was intended on the target platform. So definitely that's a big thing, looking at all of the code and ensuring, especially when it is cross technology, that's definitely something that we want to look at and make sure it works. Data, when we look at data, there's several different types of data, the way each technology stores the data. So looking at the types of data, understanding what it is that we have in our source and how we are going to move it so that we are able to maintain data integrity when we get to target, is definitely something that is predominantly the most significant task that we have on hand. So these are all the different things that together we call it as database migration. So these are some of the main things we want to pay attention to. One thing on the screen, again, that you will notice is database triggers. I know we use triggers for functionality, but there are a lot of different ways in which triggers can be written and they can be used. So we want to really make sure what is it that we have and how we are moving it. Definitely want to pay attention to all of those nuances when we are planning a migration. So all of us, I mean, as database administrators, over a period of time, all of us have, I'm sure, had a lot of experience doing different types of migration. And again, the reason I say different types of migration is something that was common a few years back was we were all doing a lot of physical data center migrations. I remember for a particular client, I moved thousands of databases. All of our data centers were in the Midwest. And then the mandate came about maybe 10 or 15 years back when this was happening, that the data centers needed to be on East and West Coast. And depending on the type of industry, there was certain things that they needed to check. So I moved this was a financial sector, and we moved all of their databases from the 2 data centers in Midwest. One we moved over to East Coast and the other to the West Coast. So again, there's a lot of different types of work involved when we are looking at physical data center migrations. Something common that a lot of us did was Solaris to Linux migration. So OS migrations for databases is something that we ran a lot of different scenarios and did migrations. And that was very common when we were all moving into Linux. Something definitely, irrespective of what sector you work in as a database administrator, migrating or rather upgrading to a higher version, definitely that is something that everybody is familiar with, and they've all worked on it at one time or the other, from 10 to 11, 11 to 12, 19, and now I'm sure all of us are busy planning and looking at options to move to 23 AI. Migrating across technology, this may or may not be as common, but then I was fortunate enough to get the opportunity to do this several times with different technologies. I've migrated from SQL Server to Oracle. I've migrated from MySQL and MariaDB to Oracle. And the big ones, obviously, a lot of Sybase databases that used to be on Unix, we moved them to Oracle on Linux. So that is definitely something that I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity, and that helped with learning more about the different technology and what helps with the migration. And of course, the newer scenario that all of us are working on right now, the last maybe 5 to 7 years, it's been a big push to move all our consulting firms over to cloud. So more and more we are working with clients and helping them set up a footprint in cloud, move their technologies, and make sure we are actually able to run and be profitable on the cloud. So the cloud migration is obviously something that we've been all involved in the last few years. So when we think about migration and when we talk about migration, for physical, depending on the type of migration, we need to tailor our recipe or our SOP. So it's not like a one SOP fits all. Everything has different requirements and different things that we need to pay attention to. So when it comes to migrating your physical data centers, a lot of most common methods we used for all standalone databases was a lift and shift method. Small databases, we did SAN level replication, so SRDF. If you had rack and you were trying to do a lift and shift, there was this whole set of steps that Oracle provided on how to re-IP your real application cluster. It was quite involved. There was a lot of work done, but it was something that really helped you understand the whole clustering technology and take you one level further when it comes to being a rack DBA. So that is definitely two of the methods that I used the most when we did all of our migrations for the data centers. When we think about Oracle OS upgrade, OS migration, like if we are moving from Solaris to Linux, most common method most of us used was DataGuard or Golden Gate, because as long as the database versions were same, they didn't care about the OS. So it was easy to go ahead, do a blue-green method, set up the new OS, have the database there, cluster them together, and then like have your DataGuard sync up and then finish your cutover and you're up and running on your Oracle with the Linux versus Solaris. Definitely, these were some of the technologies that we use. And Golden Gate is, as we go through the presentation, you will realize Golden Gate is definitely one of my favorite tools. Just the versatility of Golden Gate, because it's not just meant for Oracle, it is meant for a lot of heterogeneous migration. So it allows you to do a lot of different things. That's very helpful. A lot of scripting is possible with Golden Gate as well. And DataGuard, of course, a very, very good feature from Oracle, from like literally from version 8 and 9. We've had HA set up with DataGuard. That really helps a lot when we are trying to do any sort of blue-green migration, where we are trying to get off of right now, I know I'm like working on a lot of RHEL 8 to 9 migration, RHEL 7 to 8 or 9 migration, and all of that, I'm using DataGuard as one of the best solutions to go through that. With the newer versions, we have like PDBs, we have other options available. RMAN cross technology also works when you're depending on the type of migration. Again, there's several different solutions available from Oracle. They have excellent documentation, understanding exactly what is the task on hand, how we want to accomplish it in terms of cost, timeline, what type of tolerance they have for downtime. All of these are the ones that's important for us as consultants to look at. How do we plan a migration and get it done from end to end in a successful manner? Going through some more types of migration. When we are doing upgrades, in-place upgrades work, rolling upgrades are also, and all of that also gets clubbed under migration. In terms of technology, I do have DB2 listed here, but I'll be honest, I haven't had the opportunity to do a lot of DB2 migrations. But Sybase, Postgres, MySQL, SQL Server, those four, I have done several of those from as source, moved them all to different versions of Oracle from 10 all the way up to 12 and 19. So these are definitely a lot of migrations that we've done. And based on the different technologies, everything that I find is, even if I have my overall method or framework, every time there is definitely certain nuances just dictated by the specific source technology that we have to pay attention to. Even if we have done 20 of these, when we go to a new technology, like if we've never done MariaDB, it is very important for us to pause, understand specific features of MariaDB, specific features of SQL Server as the source, and then cater our migration framework. So yes, over the years, I've collected a lot of tips and tricks and set up a good framework. But believe me, still, when I'm faced with a new project in migration, I make sure as a team, we pay our due diligence to understanding the source and making sure all our I's are dotted and T's are marked, just because there might be something surprising about a feature that the source has that we didn't pay attention to, and that could cause a lot of problems. And attention to detail is definitely the main thing to help make migrations smooth versus making it a nightmare. So that's definitely something I would highly recommend, that if you are faced with a migration, the devil is definitely in the details. Pay attention and spend as much time in the start, because that definitely makes it so much easier as we go through the different environments and go through to the production cutover. On-prem to cloud migration, same thing. Even if it's Oracle to Oracle and Linux to Linux, which is what we are all doing, the performance on cloud can be different if your application is not cloud native. So definitely here, it's not just, yes, it's all Oracle to Oracle. Migration might be easy using Golden Gate, but something I did find with a few people is if you don't write your application to be cloud native and take care of everything, there can be performance issues. And though application code may be at fault, DBAs easily get blamed majority of the time. So we definitely want to work with them and run some baselines before we do the cutover, so everybody signs off and understands exactly what type of performance they are expecting when they go live. So what is the goal for this presentation? I know we talked, there's just so many types of migrations and we can keep talking, but I only have another maybe 30-35 minutes. So keeping it very focused, it's going to be mainly, I'm going to talk about what encompasses a Sybase to Oracle migration, S2O as I like to call it. So when we are talking Sybase is your source, what are those key features, key elements that we want to look for, and how do we make sure our framework for migration is tuned to those elements so that we don't have any problems once we get to the target? What are the issues, key issues? And again, we say key features, but key elements, but the main thing is we are trying to make sure everything that was working in Sybase, we are able to get a one-to-one match when we bring it over to Oracle. If we are not able to, those are all issues that we have to deal with. Just because the features are different doesn't mean like once we migrate, 5 features work and 2 doesn't work, and that's something that we can sign off on. So understanding what are all the different elements and features that are being leveraged on Sybase is extremely critical so that we can set up the exact same match on Oracle. So that's one of the main things to look for. Nightmare or a dream. And the reason I say nightmare or a dream is I have been called in multiple times where I've taken over projects where people started doing their own migration, end up with a slew of problems, and that really ends up being 6, 8, 12 months of problems. And then when we come in and we go start fixing things, then they see how seamless it is. And as consultants, that's something very important for us to be very aware of. So that's the whole nightmare. Or you pay attention, you take the time in the beginning, we can definitely ensure it's going to be easy. One thing I always like to add, like when I take my team into a customer site, I always like to finish up with a little bit of bonus for them, because that's one way to ensure our customer base stays solid with us. There is no churn, and they come back to us for more and more activities. So something very important is, yes, we've been tasked with moving something or migrating something or upgrading something. But if we are able to finish off and show them 5-10% advantage with the way the performance is or maintenance, if you're able to reduce the cost or the labor, that really helps them a lot. So that's definitely something I like to add into all my migrations or projects. So again, audience, any database developer, administrator, this is an easy presentation to follow and a lot of things to take away from here. So we can talk about Sybase to Oracle in general, but then I always feel when we bring a use case, it's a lot easier. Everything is not hypothetical, right? I'm like trying to show you exactly what I saw, what we did in a specific use case. So I'm going to go through and explore the problems that we had with a specific use case, and then how we charted out the steps and how I was able to get them to the end goal of running and performing well on an Oracle environment. So the task on hand that I was called into, which I later assembled a team, and this particular project, I actually led both the database team, and I was also overseeing the application team, though I don't really work hands-on with developing applications. Since just the complexity of this application, I was leading both the teams just so I had a good overview of the entire project. So this particular application, they were running legacy Sybase application. The bigger problem here was, though the order, at least the ask was, hey, move to Oracle, and then we will rewrite all our application. But when we went in and actually looked at it, what I found was the largest database, this was something we had done almost a decade ago. So the largest database, luckily at that point, was only about 2 terabytes, but they had 35 databases. It was a set of 15 applications, but the 15 applications were updating and writing to 35 different databases. Just looking at the way all of that was interconnected, I was like, oh my God, that's one too many databases. Do we really need 35 databases? Most of them, the smallest was about 750, 800 gigs, and they went all the way up to 2 terabytes. So it was a sizable amount of data. If you really look at it from 35 different databases, we had quite a bit of data that needed to be migrated. And then the main thing for me was they were rewriting applications, great, but 35 databases, do you really need 35 databases to take care of applications? What are you trying to do with it? So the first thing we did was sit down with them, and believe me, we spent a lot of time trying to understand the connection between all of these databases and the reason they had so many different databases instead of having a fewer aggregated set. So the key issues, that first thing that we saw, the legacy applications, each team or each department in the company had started writing a piece of code, and then they created a Sybase database for it. So now they had 15 applications overall in the end that was being run, but every developer team had its own 1 or 2 or 3 databases that they ended up maintaining for their application. So now you have the biggest problem is duplicate functionality. Every time a user came into the website, they were, depending on what particular application or subset they were trying to work on, the customer had to create a profile. So every application had its own profile. Every application collected its own set of data. So there was a lot of duplicate functionality from the application side, and from the data that was stored, the same data was duplicated across a number of databases. So another big problem that arises with duplicity of objects is data issue. Now the user comes in and goes in and updates in one of the applications, but then that does not exactly propagate it immediately to the other. So they log in the next day and look at something else on the website, and then their data is not updated. So there was a lack of consolidation, the way the application was collecting the data, the way it was functioning through the thing. Again, one note for this, it was a very good group of developers. I don't want to blame the company or what they were doing. It's just that the applications had started in 1980. So from 80 to 95, for 15 years, variety of developing teams had written the application and set up the databases. From 95, they had really not touched it or done much because they realized they had made it way too complicated. There was a lot of issues. So they had like 2 or 3 developers who'd been there literally from the start of the company. They knew the entire application, and they were constantly in the habit of going in and putting quick fixes. So over and over, by the time we went in and we started working with them in 2000s, this was like 2010, 2015, when we were going and looking at it, they had really not done a lot of change to the application in over 15, 20 years. And they were really concerned, like, if I go touch something, something else is going to break. And that was exactly what it was. They were using database triggers for doing a lot of the data updates. So using triggers to do all of business logic updates, again, very big problem, because you have 5 triggers now trying to get fired in a sequence over 35 databases. One of them fails, the other one is not stopping, it's still continuing. Now you have data integrity issues. You have to go through and do a DCU or a data correction. The application should handle all of this from the front end. As soon as application code fires, it should know to go do the right thing. Instead, it was handing things over to subcodes, which was handing things over to triggers. So there was a lot of problem. The entity relationship was also compromised. When we looked at different databases and how the entities were set up, there was a lot of compromise in that as well. They needed reports run on a weekly, nightly, monthly basis. So they had complex data aggregation functionality on the reports because the data was sitting separated over 35 databases. Now the reports had to go in, connect between multiple database links and aggregate data and then print out reports. So again, there were certain monthly reports that they were really concerned. Every time it ran, there were so many issues and performance. To just get that report out in a timely manner was something that everybody was concerned about. Further, just to ensure that data that's updated in a certain customer table was propagated, they had a lot of scheduled jobs in the night, ETL loads that would run, that would take the data and start updating all the different tables in the different databases, so across database links. So again, they had started out with 1 or 2 databases, ended up with 35 because nobody stopped to consolidate or redesign. And now they had code, application code, which was legacy code that they also were sitting and like they were very concerned about touching. So we had to work on data integrity. So the first thing I said was we're going to take our time, understand their databases, work on database consolidation so we could help with data integrity, ease of maintenance, and ease of operation. There was a lot of problem with both of those fields. From the application perspective also, since we were lucky, though it was a complex application we were taking on, luckily we were able to rewrite the whole thing. So that is not something you come across a lot of times. So we were given the opportunity to redesign the database and the application. So one of the things was we wanted to make sure ease of enhancements, security and hardening, audit requirements, maintenance of application, all of those things were the key end goals that we were looking when we were rewriting all of these. So a quick assembly of checklists, right? Like we are looking at S2O migration. We had to work with them and we wrote some scripts and started getting some good inventory of their objects. We tried to sort of reverse engineer and understand how we can create a ER diagram that would actually make sense, not have the same data over and over in multiple databases. How can we consolidate the databases and then bring down the number from 35 and have centralized repository where the customer and the object-based information would all be sitting, and then we could use other databases. Now, we could not bring it into one, but then even if we were consolidating it to a smaller number, we wanted to make sure it was done in a way where we could have like a wrapper application that comes in and people are able to log in, put all of their base information in that one spot, and then from there go through and make it simple and easy. So that's how we were trying to make sure we were able to proceed with the whole migration. That was one of the main things we worked on for the checklist. In terms of redesigning the database, we had to reverse engineer the ERD diagram. Like we had to go through normalization, consolidation. We had to work with the application team to streamline the whole data flow. How are you taking the data? How are you flowing it through? And we had to work with them. So that was a big part of the application redesign team that they worked on. In terms of understanding the relations and also the instance, we wanted to do data cleanse because there was a lot of duplicate data that did not match up. We wanted to do a data cleanse. As we were consolidating and redefining the relationship, we wanted to make sure the data integrity would be maintained by the new application flow. Redesigning the triggers, definitely something that we really worked on. The whole concept of having 5, 6, 7 triggers fire at the back end each time the application hit submit was a nightmare to me. I really wanted to consolidate all of the triggers and use stored procedures so the application could do its validation and could do data aggregation, anything functionality that the application needed to do. I wanted it to be called out through stored procedures. All of the reports, as we started consolidating the databases, the report designs really became a lot more simpler. It was a lot more easier for us to do the reporting at whether it was their monthly or quarterly reporting. Again, the batch processes, the main goal was to get rid of all of the ETL processes that were just moving data between those databases and trying to synchronize data in the night. So definitely we wanted to get rid of that and we worked on that as well. The duplicates, and establishing the validity was like probably the biggest thing that helped us drive forward. And all of this, the goal was ease of maintenance and ease of operations for the teams once we left the premises. Like we wanted to give them a database and an application which could be easy to maintain, upgrade, and continue on for the remaining years. So for application checklist, something that we did, the main things we did was we assessed the application because we wanted to understand how the connectivity was set up, how the current applications were written. They were not Java compatible. There were several things we had to modernize with the application. So that assessment really helped us understand how we wanted to design. We paid a lot of attention to data flow. Sybase specific features. If the applications were leveraging Sybase specific features like the identity column or not null constraints, things like that, we wanted to make sure we got a very good checklist of all the Sybase specific features so that we would make sure all of them matched one-on-one with Oracle features. That way, none of them would get lost in translation. So that was definitely something that's important. And that particular piece, depending on what your source is, it's going to keep changing. If you're moving from SQL Server specific functionality features that your application is leveraging, we do want an exhaustive list of those so we can ensure as we migrate, all of those are met on the Oracle side. Dynamic SQL, this is definitely something that you want to be wary of. If applications are using a lot of dynamic SQL which means like based on what parameters come in, it's creating a SQL on the fly and trying to push it through. If something like that were to happen, we definitely want to make sure like whatever those constraints are, we are able to rewrite the applications. And another big problem with dynamic SQL is it's very tricky to have good performance with dynamic SQL because you don't know what type of query is coming in and how it's getting written on the fly. So that's definitely something, if possible, to avoid from your application perspective. It would be better to have the SQL set up through your code. That way it is actually something that you can tune and make sure the performance is good. JDBC connect logic, understanding what type of connectivity, where the application users are coming from, all of that is important as you are redesigning your application. So what did we do? Like, so just, this is sort of like a small picture that it's easy for us to understand. So you want to first come in, do all of your application assessment and design your conversion, then go through, assess your database and make sure you have a good database design and you have a conversion methodology available. You want to analyze all of your data. That's very important because depending on what your source is, there are certain data types that may or may not be available in Oracle, or Oracle might just store them differently, might treat them differently. So understanding what type of data you have and figuring out what are going to be the best methods to migrate them, if they need conversion, understanding all of that, those are all your key. Only then you can really get into testing because now you actually know I have taken care of the application conversion, I've taken care of data conversion and migration. Then we can go into the testing phase. Again, all of this we are still doing in your dev environment. That is your playground and you want to just take care of everything in the dev environment. Once we finish in the dev environment, then when we start moving it up to like your test or perf, that's where I would ideally recommend doing all of your tuning, because generally database teams don't have the right kind of data in dev. So getting your application testing done, data validation done in dev is great, but you do want a similar load to production to do the tuning. So running it in like your UAT or perf environment would be more ideal to understand how best to do the tuning and how best to go live with it. So in terms of the analysis, something that as consultants, when we come in and we're trying to do these conversions, even if it's an isolated project, I am a big proponent of doing automation or writing scripts. The reason being, it might be a singular project, but we will definitely be doing a lot of work, manual work in the dev environment. But once we have done everything in the dev, understanding the workflow, creating your SOPs, and having a lot of scripts created helps us when we move from dev to test, UAT, perf, and then production. There's usually at least 3 or 4 environments before we reach production, which means over and over, we are going to be repeating the same steps. When you're going to do anything more than once, I really urge my team to go ahead and quickly script it together, So at least run the script versus trying to do it manually. And when we know we're going to do it 5 times, then if there's any further automation that's possible, definitely do it. The point of the semi-automated or a fully automated playbook or run book, the whole point of that is we are avoiding human error. We can understand what needs to be done. And without the stress of actually doing it manually, we're trying to create the whole run book with all of the scripts. That way, it is a quick and easy way to execute and understand all your repetitive tasks. It's so much easier when you have a quick code base that you're going to use to analyze and do the changes, send in parameters, and get that whole thing completed. Makes it faster, more efficient. You can set up a lot of logging and notification. That way, you really know where something is failing and what is happening. And then the conditions are similar because you're using a script to run it versus have one person or another person do it. Everything is done in a similar way. So scripting the tasks goes a long way in getting better results. So like I said, scripts, and then more scripts. That's the easiest way. And these are scripts that as long as it's Sybase, you can always reuse them. So that also makes it very, very easy. So what is like a quick overview, so to speak, of what we need to do? The first step would be creating your consolidated redesigned target. So our target is Oracle. We know that we've done all of our analysis. So create the design for the database, consolidate your objects, understand how to do that. And once you've landed on a design, now go ahead and let's create the target Oracle infrastructure. Make sure you have your consolidated databases with the redesigned structure. Once that is done, then the next task, especially with this particular one, since we were taking 35 and we were reducing the number of databases, there was a lot of mapping that needed to be done, a lot of database objects that we were disregarding because they were all duplicates. So we really needed to pay a lot of attention and make sure the mapping was done in a meticulous fashion so we didn't miss anything. Once the mapping was done, then the next thing was to go through and do a full object conversion, take our objects from Sybase, do the conversion, and start loading them into our target Oracle environment. Once we did the conversion and we did the load, we went through and created scripts where we could print out reports that clearly showed how we were validating the objects. So this made it easy for everybody to look at what the objects were in that source, what the objects are in the target, and application was able to sign off saying like the validation looks accurate. Now, once that is done, then we want to run some initial loads and start loading the data to see how the data load happens. What is the duration it takes? What issues are we facing? Because only when you start loading the data, you will run it, you will see the issues. And the first few times it's going to take us to do all of the changes. So data load helps you understand the issues, fix them, rerun them as needed. And then we want to go through again and do some data validation. Again, scripts for data validation is very helpful. So nobody is trying to go through and manually do any comparison, have scripts ready to validate, and then we sign off, application team signs off, so we know what's going on. So now we actually have our source and target. The target is ready with the same load, and it has all of the data, so we can actually do some database level testing, even if not application, at least from the pure database level, we can do some testing to confirm that we did a good job. Then we go through and then start doing the application testing. And that's where we want to sit through in maybe a UAT or a perf environment where we have data load that's very similar to production, and we can do good tuning as well. And this is something that's important. You want to take your time for this because the initial redesign takes time. The rest is pretty simple, straightforward. And then the application tuning, establishing a baseline in Oracle is very important because you don't want to sit Monday morning in a production call and everybody says like things were running faster in Sybase. We want to understand and establish the baseline for performance. Once all of this is done with the perf environment, then we can go through and set up the migration cutover and how we want to do the migration. So what are some methods that we could employ? So again, everything is subject to the size, the technology, and everything that we are trying to work with. So in this particular case, we did have a lot of objects, a lot of data, but then we had a lot of small, medium, and then a few large. So we employed a variety of methods. So something I do recommend is SQL Developer has a lot of different options, and it's getting better and better with versions. So it does help with both the object conversion, the code conversion, stored procedures are converted. So yes, we need a whole team of database developers working with us. But if SQL Developer can do a first cut migration and give you a framework, then instead of looking at your 2000 line Sybase T-SQL code and trying to rewrite it, we could take SQL Developer to throw it into Oracle. So we'll have an Oracle version of the 2000 line code. Then we go through and look at it and understand where the problems are and doing changes. It really does help. So especially if you have a lot of stored procedures, it's good to have a couple of developers run it through SQL Developer, then take the target and then massage it and improve it, fine tune it, makes it a lot easier because it's a much better starting point than starting from scratch. It's not just the object conversion, data conversion also happens well with SQL Developer. Another option is SQL Loader, depending on the size of the database, depending on the type of the data you're migrating. For a lot of small, medium, SQL Loader works really well too. So initially, getting it all over and getting your object and data validation, SQL Developer, SQL Loader, all of them work. You can use them in isolation or together. Definitely Golden Gate, depending on how big or large the objects are. Golden Gate is another way you can set up. So you have your source, use your SQL Developer to maybe migrate the object code, like you have your stored procedures, functions converted, but the data, you can go to Golden Gate and you can have your source as your Sybase, target as Oracle, and use Golden Gate to move the data. So this way, especially in our particular case, the reason I mentioned developer and loader is developer is definitely good starting point for code review and writing. But when in our particular case, taking 35 databases and aggregating them and consolidating them, Golden Gate really worked because we could do multiple object mapping. It's a lot easier to map it with Golden Gate. So we could take the data from 3 or 4 tables and then load it into a single table on the target. So that flexibility was very important for us in this particular case. So we used developer to do all of the object translation. Then we worked manually on the lower environment to understand exactly how to rewrite some of the code. Once all of that was done and the data, objects, and everything was validated on the lower environment, we were able to migrate. So from dev, we were promoting the same database code. So we were not trying to redo the conversion. Once we had a solid infrastructure set up in dev, the same database, the code was promoted to test, UAT, perf, and then production. So that way, SQL Developer was big in our migration. The second part was for the data, we used Golden Gate because we were aggregating from multiple databases and objects into smaller number of databases and objects. So we used Golden Gate for the migration. The object mapping, it's very critical. You can go into SQL Developer and you can set up your source and target. It really gives you very nice console to use. You can do all of your connection and your object mapping. Once that's done, and if you do a trial run, it's going to go ahead and dump out your objects and create them in SIA in Oracle. Makes it very simple and easy to use it from that point on. And once you have it, promoting the code, like with any code base change management you have, you're able to promote your code and create it in the higher environments. With Golden Gate, there's multiple ways it can be done. Since in our particular case, we had multiple databases coming into one database, we used Golden Gate, and there is something called initial sync extract that you can set up. So you go in and you run your entire thing. And while you're doing that, there is also something called a change delta that you can set up. So that really helps whether you are using it in from one instance or you're using multiple instances. We set up the initial extract. And then once that was done, we had the change capture set up so that with the change capture, once the load is done, this is especially important when you are doing production migration, because even as you are working and starting your data run, the Sybase instance is still live and there is going to be data change happening there. So if you don't have your change capture set up, once you finish, then you have to go back and try to capture the delta, which manually will not be the best option. So as you set up your initial load, you want to set up change capture. So your initial load might take in this particular case, with our large amount of data, it took us almost a week to get the initial sync done. But once that was done, the change capture takes less than like half a day to finish up. So now you have your Sybase in production live and your Oracle both having the exact same data, and you can test your application. And in our case, like I said, since our application was completely rewritten, we were able to get users we were able to open it up and have them do a lot of testing. And then all of the testing, something that I made sure was they knew exactly what they were testing, and we made sure they had scripts to go back and reverse and clean up as well. That way we didn't have to drop all the data and redo the initial sync, which if that's the only way, we can do that as well. But this way it helped. They were able to test all of their functionality, and then they were able to clean up after themselves. And then that way our cutover was going to be that much more easier. For all of our cutover, the migration during our final migration dry run, we made sure we did a full dry run, got the whole load done. All the validations, we got sign off on performance. We did full performance testing. All the functionality was tested. We were able to get full sign off. Then we worked with the testers to go through and also do a full cleanse. That way, all of the data that they had used for testing had certain flags turned on, so they could go in and test. And one of the reasons I encouraged the application team and the testing team to come up with this whole test plan was the way they were looking at, they wanted to do quarterly releases, and they wanted some sort of good testing in place. So one of the main things that we helped them was develop test cases with scripts that would clean up. That way, every quarter going forward, after we finish the conversion, they could go in and do a full load of testing. Once testing was done and they signed off, they had 4 or 5 scripts that would go in, clean out all what they had tested and validate. This way, they got good testing done, and then the production data was still, the integrity was still maintained. So this really helped them. Although it took some time to work on it, it really helped them for their future releases as well. Post-migration, all of the compilation, and from the DBA side, it's not just the application side. From our side, we also had developed a lot of scripts so we could go do full comparison and print out report on every single object, all of the triggers, all of the stored procedures, everything that we had. We were able to compile a very good inventory and do a full comparison and give them the report. This way, they knew exactly what was happening on Oracle side. They could do a one-to-one compare, and we had developed scripts on their Sybase as well. So that's how we did the whole comparison. So we would dump out from both Oracle and Sybase, give them something to compare and sign off. And these are scripts that they said they still use it for all of the Oracle releases that they do, and they go by. So yes, we can go through and do all of the migration. We can plan all of those things, but the issues that come up, that is not something that is that easy to predict. So understanding what your source has to offer, what your target has to offer, what is it that is being leveraged by the application? We need a very detailed knowledge of all three to understand what the issues are that's popping up and how do you go about resolving. So main thing whenever I do a cross-technology migration, the big thing I've always found is the issues that are related to the source features. So some of the main thing, again, I'm just trying to say the big ones that we all found when we were working on this particular thing. With our particular application, the number of triggers that were getting fired and how they were used for business logic was a big problem. So that is sort of unique to my particular client. But if you really look at some of the things here, data type. So anytime you are tasked, again, I know we only have a few minutes. I'm just going to touch on a couple of problems, and then I'll take some questions. A data type conversion is a big problem that you want to pay attention to. Date time, the way it is stored in Sybase versus timestamp, which we store all the way to the nanosecond in Oracle, is very different. So if you have queries that are trying to query your date time in Sybase, the way the results come out in Oracle are going to be different. So this is something we want to understand, educate the application team, and make sure the conversion of those values are appropriate for their application. Not null constraint. This is something which is very unique to Sybase. So you could have a table with 1 million rows and then suddenly decide your business rule has changed and a particular column cannot be null anymore. So you could go into a table in Sybase and say, declare a column not null. So now what happens is it only enforces that not null starting from that point on. So the million rows that are already in the table, which all have nulls, are not touched. Sybase will not go and validate them or invalidate them, whichever the case might be. Now, this presents a huge problem. And we take such a table and we load it into Oracle and we say, not null constraint. Now you have million plus rows that are all failing. So this actually needed us to go back, figure out a dummy value that we could add into those million rows, and that would still not affect any processing before we could do the conversion. So this is an extremely unique feature of Sybase. So Oracle does not have a way to do it. Anytime you create a column and say not null, it is enforced on the entire table. So we have to understand these unique nuances and work with them. Trailing blank was another problem. They have leading blanks and trailing blanks in Sybase, and Sybase automatically truncates and gives you the result set. So when you're trying to query, it doesn't matter whether the blanks are a leading or trailing, the value still comes out. But when we moved it into Oracle, trailing and leading blanks cause problems because Oracle is trying to compare the entire field. So it would, none of the results sets matched. So we had to figure that out, and we had to go in, and part of the conversion, we had to truncate the leading and trailing blanks before we loaded the data. So these were just few things that we ran into and we saw as problems. And there's like several issues like I've listed here, and we had to figure out a way to resolve all of them. I think I'll go ahead. I see there's only 4 minutes, so let me stop here and then open up for any specific questions that have come up, either in the chat or if anybody wants to unmute and ask questions, let's go ahead and look at that. Did I put everybody to sleep? No questions, I see. We don't have any questions. We can go ahead and close. Cool. That's everything I had, unless you had any questions for me.
Questions going once? Questions going twice? Okay, I think everybody is complete with the webinar. Thank you, Valli.
Thank you.
Monica? We just get her attention. That was a great webinar today. I hope the attendees, I see that Trump had educational information today from Valli. And of course, you can ask questions on our websites, either Viscosity or my website. Valli, did you put your email address on for the attendees at all?
Yeah, sure, I can. Right. Message here, and they can reach out on LinkedIn as well. Thank you so much, Cole. Thank you for giving the opportunity.
You're welcome, and we look forward to future webinars from you. Okay. If no one else has anything else, we have one. Oh, that was yours in the chat. Okay. So the current attendees can look in the website, can look in chat, and get Valli's email address for any questions that may come up in the future. Again, this webinar will be posted on the Viscosity's website as well as NYOUG. So I want to thank everybody for attending, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank
Bye,
you
everybody.
so much. Take care, Coleman. Thank you, Valli.
Thank you.